Okay, welcome to the CEFACT Global Trust Registry project. We're recording the meeting, and I hope that's okay for everybody present. The transcript will be produced, and the recording will be made available to everybody about 2 or 3 hours, usually after the event. A quick reminder about codes of conduct for the record. This is under the open development process of the CEFACT group, which means that basically the ideas and the development that we produce are royalty-free and available to all for free to use, a bit like open source. And the IPR policy and the open development process are linked on that slide. Quick thing about the agenda. The main thing for today's agenda really is going to be Alex giving us a run through about all the work they've been doing in Checked and how that sort of giving us ideas about how that sort of fits into what we've been doing in GTR and Grid. And then in the remaining times, we'll sort of fit into the updates and so on about other things that have been happening in the project since the last 2 weeks. Just admitting some more arrivals. These are the rather lengthy summaries, I realize. I think I must have pressed the long summary button on the second meeting. For some reason, it's come out in sort of war and peace mode. But 2 weeks ago, we had Herman van der Kooi from Fidesz community presenting the work they've been doing with KVK, the Dutch Chamber of Commerce. And that was really quite interesting. I hope if you saw it, it was really quite an interesting presentation. If you didn't see it, then the recording is available, and I encourage you to kind of watch through. You'll see many things that make you realize, okay, that's quite similar to the thinking we've got. But a few things that are quite different. They've got a process of sort of, actually, it's a process that we've almost semi-built with a Grid at the moment, but a harvesting process looking for registrars and so on, that sort of finds published DID documents and sort of pulls them into a directory, which is something we've actually slightly mirrored with the work we've been doing. And we also discussed the Senegal symposium that was a few weeks ago now, where Alina and I presented. And that presentation went well. We had HMRC coming, which is the UK's customs body, Her Majesty, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Won't bother with these actions. They're a little bit tired. I want to move to Alex and Checked. So Alex, I'm going to hand the baton to you if that's okay, and let you kind of get your run with it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, John. I'll just share my screen. Just need to find the right window. Give me a second. Okay, cool. So in today's presentation, I want to show the group a product that we've been building called Check Studio. And I believe that a lot of the design decisions that we've taken in building this strongly complement what the Grid and GTR project here is trying to achieve. So I'm going to run through a quick demo of how I believe the Grid itself or could use Checked or a Checked like adjacent technology to set up sort of trust registries for directories. So I've created a new account, Grid test. So let me just get this logged in and move things out the way, and we can kick off.
When we're looking at this, Alex, what hat should we be wearing in terms of we're looking at someone logging in as Grid test? What kind of person is that going to be?
I think this could be the authoritative UN CEFACT Grid account that goes and lists registrars in one sort of authoritative registry.
So they're using this CEFACT person that's sort of going to be managing the Grid thing.
Yes. So we'll walk through that. So let's imagine I'm a UN CEFACT person and I want to start registering different member state registrars onto an authoritative registry. Following the UNTP process, the first thing that we can do on the studio is to create a new decentralized identifier. We'll do this on sort of testnet, and we'll call this let's do this for the actual Grid. So we'll call this the Global Registrar Information Directory, or Grid. And we can take the actual URL of the current repo and use that to sort of publish our did. So this is sort of the first step, and it's going to be essentially what we're going to be trying to do is create an identifier for grid and then list identifiers for the associated registrars within a sort of trust registry tied to the grid did. So you can see here that we've now created our did for grid. This is actually live now on our testnet. You can see it has an endpoint. It's called, Global Registrar Information Directory, and it's got the GTR service endpoint as well. So we'll click continue. You can see in manage dids, we now have one did. I'm actually going to go and create a second did for our sort of test, registrar. Maybe we can even use HMRC as a good. So His Majesty's passport. HM. His Majesty. Yeah.
Alex, I hate to interrupt you, but I want to make sure that I understand what you've been doing. You created a did for an organization, so a subject that is within the UN CEFACT. I just want to make a distinction between, is it an entity, a legal entity, or is it kind of an object that you've just made identifiable?
Oh, this is for a legal entity. So on our studio, and you can see here, this is for an organization. So the predominant use of this studio is to register identifiers for legal entities. And later in the presentation, I'll show how you can attach digital identity anchors either to an identifier itself or issue them between identifiers. So the grid identifier could issue or accredit another identifier to publish its own digital identity anchors. Yeah, John.
I thought I'd be polite and put my hand up. I had a similar question. When you were going through the really kind of cool process of very simply, here we can create a did, here's the URL, bang. There didn't seem to be any kind of checking process. Are you controlling that URL? Are you kind of the authority that manages that space? Is that built in somewhere else? And we're just seeing a kind of a quick run through, not the.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So part of actually our trust registry validation process has an optional addition where you can actually go and add this did that I've just created here, this checked did, into your DNS record. So let's say if we were doing this properly and Grid actually did want to create a did. I don't know if Grid has a DNS yet, but theoretically, they could go and add this did as a text record or some type of record in the DNS. And we have a validation tool that when we verify trust registries, which I'll show you further down the demo, we can determine whether this did has actually added their did into the DNS record. And actually going into the did itself, if we were to do this linking with DNS, what I would expect is the website with the DNS to be added into the service endpoint. So there is some instructions on how to do this, but I just haven't done that for the purpose of this demo because I wanted it to be quick.
Alina has a hand up.
Yeah.
Yes, hello, good morning, everybody. Excuse me for joining late, but I had some technical trouble. I was just wondering if Alex could make me a brief summary of what exactly he was doing so that I can also understand it. Otherwise, I'm kind of lost. If you don't mind, please.
Yeah, I'll go to Hans first, and then I'll
if it can be in a language that I can understand as well, I would be grateful of.
Retracted my hand. Go ahead. Go ahead and
Okay.
answer Alina's questions.
Okay, so essentially, I want to demo today the work that we've done on this product called Check Studio. I believe that there is a lot of design decisions that we've made here, which could directly complement how the UN CEFACT and GRID could use decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials to set up a sort of registrar of registrars in different member states. So what I want to demo today is how a UN CEFACT sort of staff member could log into our service. And the first thing I did was went and created a DID for GRID. So this is the Global Registrar Information Directory DID itself. And underneath this DID, so we're going to basically create an ecosystem for GRID, and we're going to go and add other member states registrars to a trust registry. And I'll show you how we can also attach digital identity anchors to each of these sort of registrars, and how that also uses our blockchain to sort of ensure integrity and immutability of the identifiers and also the digital identity anchors. I'll pause there. Does that make sense, firstly, for you, Alina?
But yes, but considering always that the digital identity anchor, it has to be issued by a register, always.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Hans, yeah, over to you.
So if I got you right, Alex, then you've just created the root of a meta register of registries.
Correct. This is the root of trust right here. And in an ideal world, we would link it to a DNS record. And so that, you know, if people trusted the GRID DNS and domain, or it could be UN CEFACT, you know, an established domain, then this DID could be included within the DNS record. And when we verify the digital identity anchors, it routes back to this DID and therefore the root DNS record. There's more I can go into detail on that side as well, but I'll save that for maybe questions later. Okay, so let's maybe create a second identifier that we're going to add into our ecosystem. So I don't know if there's any good examples that I can use, but maybe
use registradores, use Alina's registry, because that at least then Alina can give us the right spelling and stuff if we want it in the.
Is it this one? Registradores
yes, exactly.
de España?
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
Fantastic. Let me find. Okay, so let's copy the URL. Registradores de España. Vale. Okay, so let's create this DID. There's also advanced options, but we'll just create a very simple identifier now with the setting it as an organization and setting the website as the URL.
I've got another question. Hand up, sorry.
Yes. So
you are still wearing your hat as the controller of the GRID at the moment, aren't you? You're kind of going through this process. I'm the controller of the GRID, and now I'm adding another registrar that's the Spanish registrar. But you've created the DID for them, is that right?
Okay, so in the real world, the DID of the registrar could be created by GRID, or it could be created by Alina going and creating an account herself. Cool. So there is two ways. So, and I'll explain how that works in a minute. So, okay, we've created two organization DIDs, and I think the next interesting piece to go to is our ecosystems tab. So an ecosystem is basically on Ledger, what it's doing is creating a way for one DID to sort of attach or accredit other DIDs for particular purposes. So I'll sort of go through the process and explain how this works. So we're actually going to, let's call this ecosystem, again, the Global Registrar Information Directory GRID, because I guess GRID is actually more the ecosystem rather than the organization. But okay, we can, and then let's grab the UNECE logo. Let's select our GRID DID, and we can even add a status registry. So I'm actually going to create a GRID status list. So what I'm setting up here is I'm basically saying This is our ecosystem name. This is the DID for our ecosystem. Revocation or status, revocation and suspension will be enabled. We can add a governance framework URL. For now, I'm just going to add the link to the GTR project. And then interestingly, we can also add schemas to our ecosystem. So what I'm going to do is actually, I've loaded here the digital identity anchor schema from the UNTP sort of digital identity anchor spec page. So we'll publish the link to the schema and we'll create a schema type and we will call it digital identity anchor. So we'll mirror the type from the schema and we'll hit enter. So we've got two types for the schema and we've got the schema URL. So what we're basically saying as we create this ecosystem is Grid is setting this schema as one of the authoritative schemas for our ecosystem. So then when we add other members to the ecosystem, we can accredit them with this particular credential schema or with this specific digital identity anchor schema. So let me go and create this ecosystem now. Might take a few seconds because we've also added bitstring status list revocation, which is also part of the UNTP spec. So give it 2 seconds. Should create in a second. And I'll show you as well what's happening on Ledger. So, okay, there we go. We need to tidy up the response, but essentially this should now load our Grid ecosystem and we can see the nice UN logo here. So we've now got 2 DIDs and we've got 1 ecosystem. And now we can click into the ecosystem and we can basically manage relationships between this ecosystem DID, which we set up as an organization, and other registrar DIDs as well. So what I'm going to do is actually grab the DID from Alina's Registradores de España, which is here. And we'll copy that. And we can go into our ecosystem and we can say, okay, we're going to add a member and we'll add a member DID and we can assign this DID a particular role. So it can either be accredited to accredit other entities. So this might be useful if you're actually listing like a regulatory authority. But for the purpose of the demo, I'm just going to say that the role of Registradores de España is an issuer and therefore can issue this schema, the digital identity anchor schema itself. It can self-publish a digital identity anchor schema because it's now being accredited by the Grid. We will also create a status list here. Hang on, let me add ecosystem member. Yeah, so we'll say we'll say Grid members status list. We'll create a revocation registry. Grid members. Yeah, Hans, I'll come to you. Actually, yeah, go for it now while this is creating in the background.
You're on mute, Hans.
Sorry for that. The schema that you determined here would define how a DIA from Registradores looks like, right?
Correct.
Where's that sourced from? In the future reality Grid?
Our expectation, the project's expectation, is we're using the UNTP spec of the digital identity anchor. But if we find that it's lacking or can be improved, then we're going to inject into the UNTP spec pull request changes to that DIA schema to make it better.
You know what my next question would look like, John? What's the governance looking like?
So there is in essentially you inherit under the CEFACT as a standards body. So there are processes of CEFACT to manage the things that they call standards, what they declare to be a standard, and how they update it and change it. I've every expectation that Steve Capel, who's kind of leading that project, the UNTP project, will want to lean on the kind of native GitLab kind of open processes of issues and merge requests, pull requests, and so on, as well as the governance that CEFACT provides. But it's there is a section in the spec of the UNDP document about governance, about how it's expected to work. What quickly, I know we're going to look back to Alex, but it's kind of worth saying this. The UNDP spec is built on this idea. There's a core spec, as small as possible, core spec, and then extensions of the UNDP tackle the sort of subject matter unique qualities of particular supply chains. So if you've got something very important in textiles and leather or something that's unique to that, you don't need to sort of put that into the core, you kind of put that into the extension. And so they've got this process they describe about how extensions collaborate and work with the core, and how that process of recognition works.
Yeah, I think I could ask on forever, but let's probably
go read. Go read.
No, yeah.
Okay.
Continue with Alex, bro.
Yeah, so let's just add the registradores did to the global registrar information directory. So I'll just let that load in the background, and we'll save our changes. So what this is actually doing in the background, and I will actually go and show this on our ledger, is it's creating an on-chain accreditation from the grid did to the Registradores de España did, basically saying, we accredit you to issue these things called digital identity anchors. So basically, if Registradores publishes a digital identity anchor to themselves, or updates their DID document with a digital identity anchor, we can show that this is actually being approved, and they are an accredited member of the ecosystem from Grid. So if I actually go onto our ledger now, let me just give this a refresh quickly. We should, when this loads, see a new what's called resource on our ledger, and I'll show you what that looks like in terms of how that's structured. So this will be it. 1 minute ago. Click on here. Okay, let me make this pretty. So this is basically, it's a bit jumbled, but it's a type verifiable credential, and it's called a verifiable accreditation to attest. So this is basically saying Grid accredits the Registradores de España to issue this digital identity anchor themselves. We've got the schema in here. We've got the type of schema, which is digital identity anchor, and we've also got revocation, bitstring status list sort of section in here as well. So this accreditation could be revoked. So if Grid one day decides that Registradores de España is no longer like a part of the ecosystem that they want to accredit, they can suspend or they can revoke this accreditation just by going onto the member details here when that loads, and clicking on manage status. And then you could suspend or revoke the membership of the Registradores de España. So I guess the next piece here is, okay, we've now created an ecosystem. We've created two identifiers. We've added Registradores de España to our Grid ecosystem. I think the next piece would be Registradores de España publishing their own digital identity anchor matching this schema. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. And I think I want to also understand from Alina or John whether the intention is for the Registradores de España to publish it with their own DID, so they would be the issuer, or would it be someone like Grid who would issue it to them? Because we can do both in the demo here.
No, Alex, I think the idea is that our CORPME, which is called our association, would issue the identifier. Actually, yesterday we had the discussion, and one of the concerns was how would the digital identity anchor work together with the European identifier.
So I absolutely agree, obviously, Alina, and so this idea of sovereignty is really important. So the idea would be that the registrars can and must do what they decide to do, and hopefully we can convince them to issue a digital identity anchor. But they issue that, they're the sovereign issuer of it. We can also recognize them, and that's where you've got this DIA that's recognizing that registrar is a member of the grid, and that provides. And this is where I wanted to ask a question: the potential for the linked data kind of checking. Here's a organization that's been given a DIA by registradores, and can I now check? Oh yes, registradores is recognized by the grid, and I can kind of follow the data trail. Is that?
Yes, that's exactly what we've built here.
Okay.
So
the thing is, Alex, we already have our national identifiers. Okay, maybe they're not verifiable. We would have to work on this. So the main question is, can we build on this and, let's say, transform our national identifiers in a sort of digital identity anchor? Or how would this exactly work? Because we don't want 100 identifiers.
yeah, that's true.
There's an answer, Alex, I think.
Maybe because yesterday I just met the new director of the Department of European Affairs, and she was telling me, "Oh no, another identifier."
No. So
How
the
many
whole
are we going to?
she's made a very good point, right? And we all fear the N+1 identifier thingy. So the idea is that we shouldn't demand that the registrars change the way they issue identifiers. They've got their own systems, they've got their own processes, but we can kind of shrink wrap that business identifier that they've declared inside a DIA, so that you don't change the identifier format or structure. You embed it inside a DIA, and it's sort of wrapped in a signed data packet. And it's unique, globally unique, because it's come from a registrar that is the authoritative registrar for that thing, and they themselves ensure their identifiers are unique. So if you prefix it with the registrar, you're guaranteed a unique identifier. That's like Glue, by the way. There's an initiative called Glue under IETF that is doing a very similar thing about identifiers. You want a link for Glue, Hans? I'll share it if you like.
Was it written on my forehead?
It's just the way your face is it's a good face. It's very readable.
It's big, yes, I know.
Don't play poker.
Readable.
Where's the link?
Nice face. Don't worry about it. It's a good face.
Okay, so
sorry, let's go.
Yeah. I'm just doing some sort of setup in the background.
So is that the way you're understanding too, Alex? That you've looked at the schema, obviously, of the digital identity anchor, and my understanding is that inside that schema are placeholders, if you like, the identifier that's issued by the registrar.
Yes. So let's have a look. So you're saying in here there's a placeholder for the registrar identifier.
Yes, so the registrar's issued identifier of the organization of the subject. That's what I'm looking for.
This could be like the DID, right?
Yeah, yes, it is. It could be that. We need to think of so one of the things and this is why what you're doing is really important, Alex. It's giving us questions to ask about the design and its execution, which is exactly what I know you were thinking. This will help us. The design decisions and questions come out of this. So not all registrars are going to be able to issue DIDs necessarily, perhaps. But we might have this hybrid world where they can do a DIA somehow, but without doing a DID, which is a bit odd if they could do that. But maybe their subjects can't handle DIDs yet. So their organizations can't handle DIDs. We can imagine there could be steps of maturity along the way, and they might need to cater for flexibility in some respects with still staying inside the schema. So anyway, so I've probably given us a design question rather than an answer in that.
No, I think this makes sense. So there's a credential. So
you've got it there,
there's a credential issuer section, with an ID and a name. So this would be this could be for Registradores de España to be like, we're issuing ourselves the credential.
And that exact text you were looking at just then that was on the screen, Alex, was an example of a company, though, wasn't it? So this was an example. I know this is an example schema filled out.
Yeah.
But there's an example saying company. So it says example hyphen company. So just below the orange colored ID is did web identifiers example hyphen company.com 12345. I think that was Steve's shorthand for here's a did for a company, which is being registered by the registrar being issued a DIA by the registrar.
Okay, so that makes sense. So
I like what you've done, by the way. I like the idea of the grid issuing DIAs to the registrars that are part of the grid. That's a nice thing. That's actually where we want to get to, I think, in the end.
Well, it could also be the registrars issuing their own DIAs to their members.
That's an
and pointing to the authorization to issue that DIA that the grid has then issued to them.
They could embed, they could embed a signature from the grid saying yes, and we actually are recognized by the grid as well.
So what I was going to quickly do is just maybe demonstrate how this could work on our API. So let me just quickly create an API key. We can also do this on the UI, but it's just a bit, because it's a bit complex. I think I can just quickly show on the API. So actually, let me share my whole screen. So I'm only just sharing one page. So
I love when you say this could be a bit complex, so we're going to go and see a simple one.
Yeah. So So I basically wanted to create a credential, which was a digital identity anchor. So within the attributes section of the credential, theoretically, we can use what's on the schema that we were on before to say, like, okay, we can list credential issuers, and we can maybe have the Registradores de España list, companies in Spain that they want to issue DIAs to. Is that correct?
Are you suggesting that the schema contains a list of the registrars that have been recognized in the grid? Did I hear that?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm glad I misheard that. So when you said the list, what in this, as you're scrolling around on that text, what list are you thinking would be inside?
Okay, so originally, okay, maybe I'm getting a bit confused. So I thought that this digital identity anchor was basically, it would be published by the individual registrars.
Yes.
And it would contain, relevant information about the registrar itself, such as other legal identifiers, such as how, so like this type of, also known as, what other identifiers are associated with the registrar. But then also it could issue credentials to individual companies to basically be added to a list underneath, to another registry, basically.
Yes. So the second thing you're describing is obviously the primary purpose, I suppose, for the registrar. We want to create a simple way for registrars to do what they currently do already: register organizations and land and other things, and issue a verifiable credential that encompasses that sort of thing within the UATP spec, so that then they can do the trade that they want to do and they get the supply chain transparency. The other two parts you mentioned are kind of building on that. If we want to have a grid and we want the grid to recognize the registrars that are part of the grid and so on, you've correctly thought of ways we could have verifiable credentials and DIAs support that chain of evidence, if you like.
Exactly. So basically what the Registradores de España could do is say, okay, this is the Registradores de España did, it's maybe a did checked, and we want to issue a credential to this did web example company, basically with the attribute saying, this is the name example company. We don't even need to, have the schema text in there, but something like this. Sorry, I'm doing this on the fly, but essentially what we could do is then point to the parent accreditation, which would be, going back to the UI, what the grid issued to the registradores. So in any credential that the registradores issues to companies in Spain, it can have a pointer to this accreditation from Grid, so that when this credential is verified, not only is the verifier able to determine, okay, this was issued authoritatively by Registradores de España, but also Registradores de España is accredited by Grid to issue this type of digital identity anchor.
That's exactly the kind of effect we want to achieve. Yes.
So we, if I understood it correct, we have like two levels. One of them is like when a registrador is issuing the credential for a company, or sorry, digital identity anchor for a company, and then we have to link this to the Grid. So like we have to be able to verify that we are authorized to issue this digital identity anchor within the Grid.
I think
correct.
Yes. But what Alex was showing is a way of doing that linking by embedding in the same sort of data packet, not only the registration by registradores and the company identifier and signed by registradores, but embedding in the proof, if you like, that registradores has also been recognized in the Grid. So in the same packet of data, are these two kind of signatures that are saying we've issued this and we're recognized by.
Okay.
Is that going to be a cryptographic bond?
Yeah, so I'll show you how this works. So let's assume this is now a credential that has been issued by the DID of the registradores. So I can copy this, and this could be issued completely off-chain to example company, who's the credential subject, or registradores could publish this credential, which they've just created, as like an on-chain resource to basically say, we've issued this credential to this company. If we want to store it on-chain so it's immutable and anyone can sort of search that we've issued this digital identity anchor to the company, Registradores de España could publish this on-chain. So I can maybe show what that would look like really quickly. So if I go to here, if I just download this credential real quick, then if I upload it, download this one, and then let's call this digital identity anchor, or actually type will be digital identity anchor, and then name will be example company. So what this is now doing is it will publish this credential, this cryptographically signed credential, on chain, so that anyone can verify that it was issued by the registradores, but also importantly, that I can't really show this on the demo right now, but that additionally, the registradores is accredited by Grid to issue this type of credential. So both of those things can be done in a verification check of this credential.
But you were just hacking on behalf of registradores.
Yes.
I think we give Alex some slack here because he's hacking in all sorts of directions at the same time at the moment. But what I'm taking from this, Alex, if I'm thinking about how this feels like it works, not you, but Czech has built a kind of ecosystem factory. It's designed to allow any number of different ecosystems to sort of say, okay, we've got an ecosystem. It could be education, it could be registrars, it could be whatever it is, and we've got these types of data we want to have, which is our schemas. We want to register those. We're going to have a kind of a process of trust that we're going to onboard organizations into this ecosystem. We're going to give them a crystal saying you're recognized in the ecosystem, and then they're going to participate and do their thing. But it's like this general engine for doing all that. And what you're, I think, saying is that engine and what you've learned by trying to build this engine is going to give helpful design cues about what Grid needs to think about too. Is that
exactly correct? Yeah. And some of the design decisions that we've made, for example, including the a pointer to an accreditation from GRID in the digital identity anchor itself, upon verification, you can prove that the credential is verified, the credential hasn't been revoked, and that GRID authorized Registradores de España to issue digital identity anchors. So there's like 3 different checks that you can do, and I think all 3 of those are incredibly relevant to this work basically.
I do too.
So yeah, that's where we're at. Revocation is also fully supported if you want to revoke credentials. But yeah, that's I'll pause there. I think that's enough for today, and we're running out of time as well.
A bit of time left, but I think a quick question is you watched Harman do the presentation of the work they were doing with KVK last week. I think, didn't you? Yeah. So how would you sort of compare and contrast or make the difference between what you've been working on and what they've been working on? What kind of, how do we do like the supersets of thinking here? What kind of things are we seeing you've thought of that weren't evident, say, in what we were watching from the Fidesz and KVK group?
I think it's actually really complementary because they've built like a discovery tool for like ecosystems, and because it's all DID based, you could equally discover checked based ecosystems or DID web based ecosystems. So it could be if a registrar wants to do things on Ledger, which some may do because they don't have to then have a load of hosting costs and the management of all of this infrastructure themselves, they could use a Ledger for publishing schemas, publishing digital identity anchors, and then the Fidesz work could be that sort of discovery tool for it doesn't really matter what method is used. It could be DID web, it could be DID web VH, it could be DID checked. It can show all of the different organizations that have been sort of registered, that have been added to GRID, and that have been issuing digital identity anchors. So for me, we're building things in very similar ways. So I would want to align as closely as possible with Harman and the team there. But I think largely what we provide that they don't is the Ledger piece, which of course is understandably not everyone's cup of tea, but it is a nice option I think it could be a nice option for some registrars that want to store things immutably and with persistence, and it certainly helps with making sure everything stays online all the time and is highly available, and version history of digital identity anchors is persisted as well. So, if you issue a company a digital identity anchor, which then gets updated every year, you can also see the history of the previous digital identity anchors about that company stored on Ledger as well, which would be, very important probably to persist for record keeping and auditability.
I think so too. Now I've got a question suggestion for Hans actually. Quick kind of observation. It's the 11th of December, which strangely enough is likely the last meeting we'll have in December before the break for Christmas and New Year and so on. So I think that the next meeting will be in January. What about verifiable trade, sort of sharing what you've been building, what you're doing, Hans? Do you want to do that?
By when?
By when? I like that. You're a project manager. It will be in us. So it will be like in 4 weeks' time.
Not entirely, but
in principle.
I would love to make promises, but I'm not going to bind myself on a timeline.
I wanted to make it offer. If you think it is something you'd like to do, reach out to Lena and I, and we'll find a slot, right?
Certainly. I see this probably be at the end of February.
Okay, cool. In that case, what I'd suggest we go back to, if it's okay, Lena, I'll quickly show kind of some of the stuff we've been working on, or that's now available for people to review and critique. Is that okay, Alex?
Yes, that's fine for me. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. And thank you very much, Alex. That was very interesting. I'm still digesting it. And what I want you to do is to help, in a sense, help me. You'll see in a second how you can help me. two major things that I've been sort of putting now onto the public-facing website. So you saw the URL from Alex about this un.opensource-unit-unicc.org. This is a web page and pages automatically generated by the markdown documents inside the sort of docusaurus thing. So the economic argument is written in markdown, and it comes up as a web page because of the wonders of docusaurus. But this is an important thing for all of us. This short summary here is trying to make the case for the global economic benefit of a global registrar information directory. So I encourage you to have a look at it, critique it, say where it could be improved or where it doesn't make sense, and we'll make it better, because I think it's going to be very important that it's pretty good. It's backed up by this second document, so that goes sort of summary, economic argument summary, and then it has a researching the economic argument for the grid and the digital identity anchor. So this is a lengthier document, and it's got about 40 references at the end of it and a whole bunch of other things. And yes, I did have the help of AI in doing the deep research, but I've gone through the whole thing and checked all the words and checked all the links and done some other stuff. So I'm guilty too if there's any hallucinations in this, but it's something that we need, and I think it's interesting to sort of see the arguments that it's coming forward with around why this project needs to exist, what benefits it provides. So that's one chunk of economic argument. The other chunk is the stuff that I've been doing in sort of preparation for what Alex was just describing, and the interest from many countries, and Spain is obviously kind of racing ahead and doing some things already about the pilot. So we've already had for a while now this idea about the kind of qualities that we're looking for a pilot implementation. So this information has been around for a little while, but what I was really working on over the weekend really was trying to do what Steve Capel suggested, build out an example environment that lets us just capture the sort of design decisions that Alex has built and Grid have built, kind of working, not kind of, a really working environment. And by doing that, they've got lots of hard-earned lessons. And what this is a sort of a very simple simulation of the grid. So we've taken this logical model and said, how might we mirror this grid using just the GitLab repository that we have, the UNICC GitLab repository, and allowing other registrars to have similar GitLab repositories. So the fundamental sort of ideas of this environment would be we play with concepts and requirements and design decisions inside our own GitLab kind of environment for UNICC, and we allow registrars to create their own little space. And what we do is we read their space. That's why this word harvester is there. We're reading the data that they've made available to us, and we're checking the signatures of that data, and we're checking the validity and the currency and all these other things about signatures. And we can do all that in a very similar way to the way that we were just seeing from Alex using the real did sort of processes. We can do all that with the signatures that you get from GPG, which is one of the signing processes for GitLab and SSH. We're using GPG for the general ones so this is the design decision and details, and that again, Alex, you and I, and Sankashan and Juhans and others, anybody that's interested, crawl through this and let's sort of make it better about the design decisions and how it works. We've got a bit of a participant guide about how you can set one up yourself. And the way I've done this is, you'll notice if you've been looking at the screen of it, I've created fictional countries like Atlantis, which obviously has a sea organization house, and Genovia, which is out of Princess Bride, by the way, and all these other sort of famous fictional countries. So we've got 4 of them. So and here's the sort of thing that we're seeing from the dashboard is a bunch of fictional registrars that I'm reading, and I'm reading the metadata of what it would be a DID. And they've got the descriptive data. So if I click on the registrar of the Gondol Kingdom, you've got some readable text about that. But you can also see that their signature of the content was checked and verified. Yes, that content has been signed by what we understand to be the registrar of Gondol. So it's got a bunch of things in it that are simple, but I think good enough to let us play with some of the ideas and sort of flush out some of the requirements. The idea will be this gives us the requirements that we would express for the actual operational system. You know, we find out problems with this design, with this pilot, we go, that means we're going to have this thing. A bit like the conversation Alina was taking us to about the business registrars having their own identifier, and they must be able to issue their own identifier. And so that sort of thing comes into the, we capture that by playing with this stuff in the pilots. So that's what I built over the weekend, really. So you can, I'll show you for a laugh. This is me having a conversation with AI over Saturday and Sunday about things like, why don't we fix the, you know, so basically I don't like its design at times, and you didn't put any error checking in, so put some error checking in, and you didn't do this thing, do that. So anyway, I'm getting it to produce a sort of better answer, and produce this sort of guideline. So I think it's okay. I'm not embarrassed by it anymore. But I do think it's going to learn from Alex's work, yours, Hans, and others on this call, as well as the stuff we saw from Harman earlier on 2 weeks ago, in terms of the ideas that we need to sort of capture as requirements, design decisions for the grid. So that's any. There are probably loads of questions like, what on earth have you been doing, John? But any questions that come to mind that I can handle now? Stunned silence. So if you're interested, go to the web pages. You'll find the design architecture, how the participant guide, and also there's this business case. So if you're a pilot that wants to do a pilot, so you're a registrar working in the, you know, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs wants to do a pilot. What's the business case I'm doing? So there's a template to sort of pull down if you want to help you write the template for your own organization, to say this is why we're doing it, this is why it's worth doing it, this is how we're going to structure it. And then there's this participant guide that you can run right now and create a GitLab repository and create the structure, and then we can link you in as a registrar and we can play with doing stuff, and you'll then appear on the pilot grid.
So, sorry, I'm just trying to get my head around the GitLab model. So are we saying that the sort of SSH keys and like key infrastructure that you can generally use for signing on GitHub or GitLab is going to be what sort of secures JSON files that publish information about the registrars? Yeah.
It's Mickey Mouse, right? It's not the real thing. It's a model. But what we're doing is we're mirroring the idea of things being signed, being able to check things are signed. Also have the idea of you know, obviously one thing GitLab does very well is version control and other things. So there's a sort of it lets anybody play in a very rough sense, a prototype sense. But if anybody has the capacity to do proper did docs and proper did checks, then that can run too, right? It can be we can almost mirror the way we might well have registrars who have different levels of ability to play with the technology. So we've got a kind of a very simplistic one that pretty well I would hope any registrar in the world could kind of get up to, and then we will have more sophisticated ones that take advantage of the technology like you were showing us earlier, Alex.
And is a digital identity anchor issuance out of scope of this? Is this just for setting up a sort of... sorry.
It's not out of scope, but from a project point of view, we want to nail down how the grid works and how the DIAs can be used. Now, to show how they can be used, yes, we should be playing with issuing them as a registrar, but that's going to be up to registrars to decide to do, right? We don't do that in our current thinking. We don't do that for them, but that's a possible idea. But we don't do it for them. Is the general sort of principle? They're sovereign nations. They do their own issuance, but we do need to nail down the way the grid thinks and works, and that might mean, as you demonstrated, issuing our own digital identity anchors back out to registrars to show we recognize you as a registrar for Gondal, whatever other countries we make up. So for me, it was really just a way of showing the sort of handshaking idea and the harvesting process and so on. So one of the cool things about this approach is that all of these listed entities are sovereign in the sense that if the grid goes down, they don't go down. They're still issuing and they still got their signatures and they still got their stuff. And we don't see any of the registry data. We don't see any of the actual lists of company names and other things. We're not sort of interested in that because we don't want to mirror that content or be responsible for it. It's a bit like the UN's very clear delineation of liability, that we will faithfully take the data you've given us and we will make sure that's exactly the data that we present. But we aren't responsible for the accuracy of the data you've given us. That's your responsibility. And that's the sort of way that the liability process works. Is that right, Alina, more or less?
Yes, yesterday some colleagues were asking me if this would work in a similar way like e-justice does in Europe.
How
Because
did you
they find...
I have no idea how e-justice works.
How did you answer the question?
Not really, because e-justice is not working well, actually.
Was that a loaded question from them then?
Yes, it is loads of questions. I was actually considering to organize a meeting with you because you know, when we have these big changes, then you have to update again from scratch the people. They have absolutely no idea about how. Yeah,
I think I'm blessed by ignorance in this case, right? I'm not a lawyer, and I don't claim to have dived deeply into the legal structure of Europe and other parts of the world. But so for me, I've answered it very simply, which is we will make this as simple as we can and no simpler, but we'll make it add value to the world's supply chain sort of transparency and trust. And even as we said in the other parts of the project, even if we get a trustworthy list of the registrars in the world for each country, that's a pretty good thing. And that can add some sort of stability and some certainty and so on. That's not a bad little milestone to achieve. And all the other questions about, well, how does it work with, no. They're downstream. They're downstream, right? And there can sometimes be deliberate spanners in the spokes if government cyclists.
But I pretty much liked Hunt's face when I mentioned e-justice.
Yeah, Hans is our litmus paper for.
Sorry, my face continuously speaks. So I can't.
Yeah, it's great. Very eloquent.
Like rolling the eyes. That was an answer.
But I think you're very much the rolling the eyes gives us the lessons to learn. We must keep this as simple as possible, and it's not, after all, it's not just Europe that we want to serve. So we should not get pulled into the mire of European law too much, right?
No, because I had the feeling they were a little bit stressed since we are leading this We Build project, the business package. Then they were a little bit stressed about how would this work coexist, let's call it like this, with a European identifier, because they said, oh wow, then maybe we will have problems with the European Commission because we were supposed to use the European identifier and now we have this other identifier, and they were a bit scared, frightened. Yeah, this is exactly the word, frightened.
We've got choices we can still make. Things aren't set.
Like they would say, we don't want any problems with the European Commission because according to AEDT, we have to use the European identifier. And then I said, yeah, but this completely a different thing.
Maybe, I mean, there can be sometimes really important changes, subtle changes to the vocabulary we use, the words we're using. So if the words digital identity anchor cause us problems, but the concept of what we're trying to achieve is actually acceptable, maybe we find another way of describing the DIA.
Yeah, but it's also not a matter of changing constantly to the names for everything, because
yes, but I
think we would have to provide proper information.
Alina, this is something where I think legal opinions are required, and lawyers need to understand the technicalities behind the things that we're building in order to catch the Europeans and all their EU ID dreams.
Go, sorry.
The question is how the EUID, I call it building, can be bound to what we're doing here, or what we're doing in verifiable trade. And you know,
for us, I think it can be it can be contained within, right? So
yes.
it has its own life, it has its own significance.
I would also see it just in a similar way as the LEI code, for instance.
Yeah, so exactly right. The LEI code can also be included, and the LEI itself has recognition of the registrars and other things. So there's these things like shells within shells or whatever, Fabergé eggs or something. They've got, you know.
Yes, you know, but I'm always afraid that once we have a solution, like in 3 years' time, the legal world will only then wake up and then throw spanners in the works, because they then only start their opinionating processes. And
So Alina's done some very good work of trying to write down the legal implications of a digital identity anchor. So Alina, I'm surprised you didn't point them at the work you've written. You should read this content, because I think that what Hans is saying is very important and true. Getting people's opinion early is invaluable, and getting people's legal opinion on things is also invaluable. And I think we will do our best to make it as minimally intrusive. You've written words along the lines that their sovereign.
Yes, but Hans is right, because any identifier involves, let's say, on one hand, technical requirements, but legal requirements.
So my instinctive I hate trouble mind says yes, that's okay. The EU identifier is in the EU. It's got all sorts of constraints and laws and things around it, and you publish them. Fantastic. Good on you guys. We can put an EU ID inside a DIA. We're not saying we're the parent or the supervisor or the controller, but if someone wants to publish a DI with an EU ID inside it, go ahead. It's fine. It hasn't changed the legal significance of the EU ID. It's just a container for a number of identifiers that you might present about yourself, including an LEI. So I think there's ways out of it, but there are definitely ways into the swamp. So let's avoid the swamp if we can. But I do think you've done some really good work on this legal ideas stuff, Alina.
But from my point of view, it's clear.
Yeah. So point them at your work. Point them at your work and ask them to read it.
Yeah.
Don't be shy. It's good stuff. I've done my best, by the way. You should probably double check this, but I've done my best to pull it in.
No, they have just asked me to grant them access to all the documents so that they can read it. So
these are now the documents that I in many ways I hope are now on here, right?
Yes, exactly to those, because this new board, they have no idea. Of course, they have to read all the documents from scratch. And
yeah, so this one here, the digital identity anchor, legal meaning and data structure, that's the one that I think they would then be going to be. I would love you to have a double check to make sure I haven't broken it by pulling it into Markdown and then putting it onto the site. So
it's exactly the same as the Google documents, if I'm not wrong.
That was my aim. But remember, we were doing a bit of a merge process. So my aim was to lose nothing and to sort of put it into this space. But we had to sort of, and remember there was a renumbering requirement. So because of the two sections, things were pulled together. So do have a read through.
But I don't see here the eligibility requirements of the.
So you're talking about the eligibility requirements is not in the.
Oh, it's in document number 4. We merged it with document number 4. Okay.
It's in this one, yeah.
Yes. Now I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So please make sure I haven't broken anything. I didn't want to, obviously. So have a scroll through. It's now 8 minutes.
Okay, I'll have a look. Okay.
We should probably call it quits, I think. So as I highlighted a little earlier, I think this will probably be the last before next year, given the time that 2 weeks from now will hit. But channels will remain open as far as I'm concerned from an email point of view, Slack, and so on. So I won't be shutting down after the end of this call. We've got a call tomorrow with the US, and will be available on channels, with exception, of course, for public holidays and stuff.
All right. Thanks a lot. I need to drop here.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.